The coffee cup shattered against the marble floor, and I watched the dark liquid spread like blood across white stone. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, dropping to my knees before anyone could yell. My hands shook as I reached for the porcelain shards. This was the third thing I'd broken this week at Celestino's, and Mr. Vitale had already warned me that one more mistake would cost me this job. I couldn't lose this job. Not with Mom's medical bills stacking up like accusatory letters on our kitchen counter. "Leave it." The voice came from above me, low, quiet, dangerous in a way I couldn't name. I looked up slowly, still kneeling in the spreading coffee, and met eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He stood over me in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my rent, perfectly tailored to a frame that suggested violence held carefully in check. His face was all sharp angles and shadows, beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, something you admire from a distance while knowing it could cut you open. I said, "Leave it." He extended a hand, palm up, waiting. I stared at that hand, strong, scarred across the knuckles, a silver ring on his thumb etched with symbols I didn't recognize. Something in my chest tightened with a warning I didn't understand. "I have to clean it," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted. "I'll get fired." "Not if I say you won't." The certainty in those words made me look at his face again. There was something wrong about him, something that didn't fit with the usual Wall Street types who came to Celestino's for power lunches and discreet affairs. This man wore expensive clothes like armor, and when he moved, the two men at the table behind him shifted in their seats, hands disappearing beneath their jackets. I took his hand because refusing felt more dangerous than accepting. His grip was firm, controlled, and when he pulled me to my feet, I caught the scent of him, cedar and gunpowder, and something darker, like smoke from a fire that never quite goes out. "Thank you," I managed, pulling my hand back. My palm tingled where his skin had touched mine. He didn't respond, just studied me with an intensity that made my breath catch. His gaze moved over my face slowly, deliberately, as though he were memorizing the placement of every freckle, every imperfection. "What's your name?" "Elena." The word came out before I could think better of it. "Elena Moretti." Something flickered in his expression, surprise, recognition. It vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. "Italian?" "My father was. He died when I was 8. Why was I telling him this? I never talked about my father, especially not to customers who looked at me like I was a puzzle they needed to solve. "Moretti," he repeated, tasting the syllables. "What was his first name?" Giovanni." The coffee was still spreading across the floor, and I could feel Mr. T.M. Vitale's eyes burning into my back from across the restaurant. "I really should. I knew a Giovanni Moretti once." His voice had gone even quieter, almost gentle. "Long time ago. He was a good man." My throat tightened. "You knew my father?" But he was already turning away, moving back to his table with that predatory grace that made every eye in the restaurant track his movement. The two men with him stood immediately, one pulling out his chair, the other scanning the room with flat, watchful eyes. I stood there in the spreading coffee, my heart hammering against my ribs, until Mr. Vitale's sharp voice cracked through my daze. "Elena, what are you doing? Clean that up and get back to work." I grabbed towels from the kitchen, my hands still shaking. As I mopped up the mess, I felt that dark gaze on me again, heavy and inescapable. When I risked a glance toward his table, he was speaking with the two men in low tones, but his eyes never left me. The sensation crawled over my skin like a physical touch. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of orders and whispered conversations I wasn't meant to hear. Celestino's attracted a certain type of clientele, wealthy, powerful, dangerous in subtle ways. But that man was different. Everyone else in the restaurant seemed to sense it too. They gave his table a wide berth. Even Mr. Vitale, who normally hovered over big tippers like a vulture, stayed near the kitchen, watching from a distance. When I brought water to a nearby table, I caught fragments of his conversation. "3 families are circling," one of the men was saying. "Constantine wants a meeting. Let him want." That voice again, cold as winter stone. "We don't negotiate from a position of weakness. Sir, the shipments are handled." The finality in those 2 words ended the discussion. I hurried away, my pulse jumping in my throat. Shipments. Families. These weren't business terms, not the legitimate kind anyway. At 9 o'clock, the dinner rush finally ended. I was wiping down tables in the back section when I realized the restaurant had gone quiet. Too quiet. I turned and found him standing 3 feet away. My heart stopped, then started again too fast. You move like you're afraid the floor will break, he said softly. Like you don't want to take up space. I clutched the damp towel, searching for words that wouldn't come. He stepped closer, and I caught that scent again, cedar and smoke and danger. Your father. Did he ever tell you what he did? Before you were born? He worked in import-export. Wine, mostly. Something that might have been sadness crossed his face. Is that what your mother told you? What else would she tell me? He reached out slowly, giving me time to step back, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers were gentle, but I felt the violence they were capable of, humming just beneath the surface. Be careful. Elena Moretti, he whispered. You work in a restaurant where dangerous men eat. Do you know what happens to people who see too much? My mouth went dry. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. His hand dropped away, but he stayed close, so close I could see the flecks of gold in those dark eyes. Sometimes the safest thing is to be invisible. You're not invisible. I don't understand. You will. He stepped back, and the absence of his nearness felt like cold water. Your shift ends at 10? I nodded, not trusting my voice. My driver will take you home. Don't argue. I take the subway. Not tonight. He was already walking toward the door, his two shadows falling into step behind him. At the threshold, he paused and looked back at me one last time. Your father was a good man, Elena. Better than he had any right to be, given the life he left behind. Don't make his mistakes. Then he was gone, and I was alone in the empty restaurant with questions burning in my chest and the ghost of his touch still tingling against my skin. Outside, through the rain-streaked windows, a black car idled at the curb, waiting. I didn't take the car. Instead, I slipped out the kitchen exit while Mr. Vitali was in his office, pulled my hood up against the rain, and walked the 12 blocks to the subway station. My sneakers splashed through puddles that reflected neon signs and streetlights in fractured colors. The whole way, I felt watched. I kept glancing over my shoulder, searching for the black car, or those flat, watchful eyes, but saw only the usual city night tourists huddled under awnings, delivery drivers racing against time, homeless men sheltering in doorways. Still, the feeling persisted, crawling up my spine like cold fingers. Who was he? And how had he known my father? Mom never talked about Dad's work, always changed the subject when I asked. He loved you very much, she'd say. That's what matters. But there were things in our apartment that never made sense. The thick envelope of cash she'd found in his jacket after the funeral. The strange men who'd come to pay respects and called him Gio, with a reverence that seemed wrong for an import-export businessman. The subway platform was nearly empty at this hour. I stood near the emergency call box, my usual spot, and tried to shake the chill that had settled in my bones. The man's words echoed in my head. Your father was a good man, better than he had any right to be, given the life he left behind. What life? The train arrived with a screech of metal on metal. I found a seat near the door and pulled out my phone to text Mom that I'd be home soon. The screen lit up with a message from an unknown number. You should have taken the car, D. My breath caught. I stared at the letter, at the confidence of that single initial, and my fingers trembled as I typed back. How did you get my number? 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, I get everything I want, Elena. Eventually, I should have been terrified. Should have blocked the number, filed a police report, told someone. Instead, I felt something dangerous unfurl in my chest, curiosity mixed with something darker, something I didn't want to name. What do you want from me? The dots appeared and disappeared twice before his response came. I'm still deciding. Sleep well. I didn't sleep well. I lay in my narrow bed in the apartment I shared with Mom, listening to her oxygen machine hum in the next room, and replayed every moment of that encounter. The way he'd looked at me, the scars on his knuckles, the men who moved like soldiers at his back. At 3 a.m., I gave up and opened my laptop, typing Giovanni Moretti, New York, into the search bar. The results were sparse, an obituary from 17 years ago, a few social media profiles that weren't him. I dug deeper, adding terms like import-export and wine business, but found nothing except dead ends and 404 errors. Then I tried something different. I searched just D and New York, and Restaurant Celestino's. This time, the results made my blood run cold. Dante Salvatore, the headlines read. Alleged crime boss, Mafia prince, the untouchable. My hands shook as I clicked through articles 5 years old, 3 years old, recent ones from last month. Every piece painted the same picture. A man who controlled half the city's underground operations, whose family had run organized crime in New York for 3 generations, who had been investigated 17 times and never once convicted of anything. There were photos. Him in a suit outside a courthouse, his face carved in stone. Him at a charity gala, a beautiful woman on his arm who looked terrified behind her smile. Him standing in the ruins of what the caption called a suspected arson attack on a rival operation, his expression revealing nothing. In every photo, his eyes were the same, dark, empty, dangerous. Your father was a good man, better than he had any right to be, given the life he left behind. Oh God, had my father been part of this world? Had he worked for the Salvatore family? The possibility made my stomach turn, made every childhood memory feel like a lie. I closed the laptop and pressed my hands to my eyes. But I couldn't unsee those headlines, couldn't unknow what I now knew. Dante Salvatore had touched me, had warned me, had sent his driver to take me home. Why? The next day, I called in sick to work. Mr. Vitali sounded irritated but didn't argue, maybe because I'd never missed a shift before, or maybe because he'd seen Dante Salvatore looking at me and understood that some situations were beyond a restaurant manager's control. I spent the morning taking Mom to her doctor's appointment, holding her thin hand as we waited for test results we both knew wouldn't be good. The cancer was winning. We'd known it for months, but the doctors kept using words like options and treatments, as though hope were still on the table. "You look tired, baby," Mom said as we rode the bus back home. "You're not sleeping." "I'm fine." She squeezed my hand with what little strength she had left. "Your father used to get that look, like he was carrying weight that wasn't his to carry." My throat tightened. "Mom, what did Dad really do? Before I was born?" Her face went carefully blank. "He imported wine, Elena. I've told you." "Please." I turned to face her fully. "Someone at the restaurant said they knew him, said he left behind a life." What did that mean? For a long moment, she just looked at me with eyes that had once been bright green and were now faded to the color of old moss. Then she said, very quietly, "Sometimes the past should stay buried, Elena. Your father made sure of that. What if it won't stay buried? Then you run." Her grip tightened, surprisingly fierce. "You hear me? You run and you don't look back." But I couldn't run. Not with Mom dying, not with bills that would bury me, not with Dante Salvatore's words still burning in my ears. That night, my phone buzzed at midnight. "Come to the address I'm sending. Alone. D." A second later, a location dropped into my messages, a warehouse in Red Hook, the kind of place where bodies washed up and questions went unanswered. I should have deleted it, should have blocked the number and pretended none of this was happening. Instead, I found myself pulling on jeans and a jacket, leaving a note for Mom that I'd gone to a friend's place, and walking out into the Brooklyn night. The street was empty except for shadows and the distant wail of sirens. At the corner, the black car idled like a patient predator. The back door opened as I approached. "Miss Moretti," the driver said, his face invisible behind tinted windows. "Mr. Salvatore is waiting." I thought about my father, about the man he might have been before I was born, about the choices that led him away from this life and toward the quiet death of a Tuesday morning heart attack. Then I climbed into the car, and the door closed behind me with the finality of a coffin lid. The warehouse smelled like rust and river water. I followed the driver through darkness, broken only by the amber glow of industrial lights hanging from chains. Our footsteps echoed against concrete, each sound magnified in the cavernous space. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped with metronomic insistence. "Through there," the driver said, gesturing to a metal door that looked like it had survived several attempts at forced entry. He didn't follow me. I stood alone in that vast emptiness, my hand on the cold door handle, and gave myself one last chance to turn back, to run, like Mom had said, to pretend Dante Salvatore was just another customer who'd been kind to me once. But I'd never been good at lying to myself. I opened the door. The room beyond was smaller, warmer, a converted office space with exposed brick walls and furniture that cost more than most people earned in a year. A fire crackled in a marble fireplace that had no business existing in a warehouse. The flames cast dancing shadows across burgundy leather chairs and a mahogany desk covered in papers that looked like architectural blueprints. Dante stood at the window, his back to me, one hand braced against the glass as he stared out at the dark stretch of the East River. "You came," he said without turning. "I wasn't certain you would. You knew I would, or you wouldn't have sent the car." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He turned slowly, and the firelight caught the planes of his face, making him look carved from marble and shadow. He'd loosened his tie and rolled his sleeves to his elbows, and I could see more scars, a jagged line across his left forearm, another that disappeared beneath the fabric near his wrist. "Smart," he said. "Your father was smart too. It didn't save him." "What happened to my father? The truth?" He moved to the desk and poured amber liquid into 2 glasses. "Or the version that will let you sleep at night?" "I'm not sleeping anyway." Something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. He crossed the room and held out 1 glass. When I took it, our fingers brushed. And that electric recognition sparked again my body, understanding something my mind refused to accept. "Giovanni Moretti worked for my father," Dante said, his voice low and matter-of-fact. "He was a good soldier, loyal, smart enough to keep his mouth shut and his hands clean when it mattered. But then he met your mother, and he decided he wanted out." I took a sip of the whiskey to steady myself. It burned going down. "And your father let him go?" "No one just walks away from this life, Elena." Dante's jaw tightened. "But your father was smart. He had collected insurance, evidence of operations, names, account numbers. He made a deal, his silence for his freedom. My father agreed, because the alternative was messier. And the heart attack? Was a heart attack." Dante set his glass down and stepped closer. Close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "I know what you're thinking. But we didn't kill him. Giovanni Moretti died because his heart gave out at 43, probably from stress and guilt, and the weight of living with what he knew." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know who you are. What blood runs in your veins." His hand came up slowly, his knuckles brushing my cheek with unexpected gentleness. "And because the past you think is buried is starting to claw its way back to the surface." My breath caught. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said quietly, "that your father's insurance policy was never found. My father died last year, and now there are 3 families circling like wolves, all of them trying to fill the power vacuum. One of them, Konstantin Volkov, thinks Giovanni Moretti's daughter might know where her father hid his secrets." The glass slipped from my fingers. Dante caught it before it fell, his reflexes inhuman fast, and set it aside without breaking eye contact. "I don't know anything," I whispered. "I was 8 years old when he died. He never told me anything about any of this." "I know." His thumb traced the line of my jaw, and I hated how my body responded, leaning into the touch like a flower toward light. "But Konstantin doesn't know that, and he won't take your word for it. So what am I supposed to do?" "You're supposed to trust me." The words were a command and a plea all at once. "Let me protect you until we figure out what Konstantin wants and how to give it to him or eliminate him." "Why would you protect me?" "You don't know me. I knew your father." Something vulnerable cracked through his carefully controlled expression. "He saved my life once. When I was 17 and stupid and thought I was invincible, took a bullet meant for me during a warehouse ambush. The scar is probably still visible on his left shoulder, if you ever saw it. I had. A puckered circle of tissue Mom always said came from a construction accident. Another lie in the architecture of my childhood. So this is about debt," I said, and hated how my voice shook. "You're protecting me because you owe him." It started that way. Dante's hand slid to the back of my neck, his fingers threading through my hair. "But that's not why my heart is beating too fast right now. That's not why I've thought about nothing but you since you dropped that coffee cup and looked at me like I was a monster you couldn't quite make yourself fear. You are a monster." But I didn't pull away. "Yes." The word was exhaled against my lips, close enough to taste. "I've killed men, Elena, ordered deaths, built an empire on blood and fear. I am exactly what the newspapers say I am." "Then why?" "Because you looked at me and saw something else. Just for a moment, something that might have been human." His forehead touched mine, and I felt him trembling, this man who held half the city in his scarred hands. And I haven't felt human in a very long time. We stood like that for a long moment, breathing each other's air, balanced on the knife's edge between danger and desire. Then headlights flashed through the window, and Dante pulled back instantly, his expression shuddering closed. "That's Marco," he said, his voice controlled again. "He'll take you home. Pack a bag. Tomorrow, you move into one of my properties, somewhere Konstantin can't reach you. I can't just leave my mother. She's already being moved to a private facility. Better care than that hospital was giving her. Full-time nurses. Everything she needs." I stared at him. You can't control my whole life. Watch me." He caught my chin, forcing me to meet his eyes. You're mine now, Elena Moretti. Mine to protect, mine to keep safe. Fight it if you want, but it won't change the truth. And what truth is that? His smile was dark, dangerous, and devastatingly sad. That I would burn this entire city down before I let anyone hurt you. The penthouse smelled like leather and expensive cologne, and a loneliness so deep it had soaked into the walls. Marco Dante's driver, who I'd learned was actually his head of security, had brought me here just after dawn. My small duffel bag looked ridiculous in the marble foyer, a child's toy in a palace built for kings and criminals. Mr. Salvatore will be here this evening, Marco said, his face professionally blank. Until then, you stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone. Don't go near the windows. Don't... I get it. I'm a prisoner. You're protected. He said it like there was a difference. The security system is biometric. If anyone unauthorized tries to enter, the building goes into lockdown and I get an alert. Your phone is clean, I checked it myself. Use it to call your mother if you want, but nowhere else. He left before I could argue, and the silence that followed felt like physical pressure against my eardrums. I explored slowly, mapping my gilded cage. The penthouse sprawled across the entire top floor of a building in Tribeca, all floor-to-ceiling windows and exposed steel beams and art that probably cost more than I'd earn in my lifetime. The living room could have held my entire apartment 3 times over. The kitchen had appliances I didn't know the purpose of. There were 4 bedrooms, each with its own bathroom done in marble and gold fixtures, but it was the last room, tucked away down a private hallway, that stopped me cold. The door was ajar, revealing walls covered in photographs and documents connected by red string like something from a detective show. My breath caught as I stepped inside and saw my own face staring back at me. Photos from outside Celestino's, from the subway station, from the hospital where I took Mom for her treatments. How long had Dante been watching me? But it wasn't just me. The wall held older photos too, my father. Young and handsome in clothes that didn't fit the man I remembered. My mother, before the cancer, before the weight of secrets had hollowed out her eyes, and Dante himself, younger but already dangerous, standing beside a gray-haired man who had the same dark eyes and cruel mouth. His father. I moved closer, reading the notes scrawled beside photos. Giovanni M., exit agreement, 06. Constantine V., current threat, believes GM had copies. Elena M., surveillance approved, target assessment, innocent, innocent. The word felt like both absolution and accusation. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. An unknown number, but I knew who it was before I answered. Did you find my wall? Dante's voice was rough, like he'd been up all night, like maybe he hadn't slept since I'd left the warehouse. You've been watching me for weeks. It wasn't a question. Months. No apology in his tone. Since Constantine first mentioned your name at a meeting in July, I needed to know if you were playing ignorant, or if you really didn't know anything. And, you're a terrible liar, Elena. It's one of the things He stopped himself. You're not involved, that's clear, but you kept watching. Silence on his end, loaded with things neither of us was ready to say. Then, I kept watching. Why? Because you were a problem I couldn't solve. His voice dropped lower, intimate, despite the distance. Because I'd look at those surveillance photos and see the way you smiled at that old man who comes to Celestino's every Tuesday, how you always gave him extra bread. Because you were supposed to be just another loose end, and instead you became what? A complication. He exhaled slowly. Did you call your mother? The deflection was obvious, but I let it happen. Yes, she loves the new facility, she cried. She never cries. Good. No, not good. You can't just buy people's cooperation like that. Can't throw money at problems and expect them to disappear. Watch me. The same words from last night, but softer now. I have more money than God and fewer morals. If I want to give your mother the best end-of-life care money can buy, I will. If I want to make sure you're safe, I will. You don't get a vote. That's not how. There are men downstairs right now, Elena. Men who work for Konstantin Volkov. They're watching the building, waiting to see if you'll come out. I have 4 guys watching them, and I guarantee you Konstantin has people watching my people. This is how the game works. Everyone watches everyone else, and the first person to blink loses. My stomach dropped. How do you know they're there? Because I would be there, if our positions were reversed. Matter of fact, like we were discussing the weather. Constantine wants what your father took, If he can't get it from you willingly, he'll take you and make you talk. He specializes in making people talk. The fear I'd been holding at bay crashed over me in cold waves. I don't know anything. Even if he takes me, tortures me, I can't tell him something I don't know. He won't believe you. Dante's voice turned hard. He'll keep trying until you break or die, whichever comes first. That's why you stay in that penthouse until I end this. How are you going to end it? However I have to. The finality in those words made my skin go cold. You're going to kill him, if necessary. No hesitation. Or I'll find what your father hid and buy Constantine off. Or I'll start a war that makes the other families choose sides, until Constantine's isolated and weak enough to eliminate quietly. I have options. Those are all terrible options. They're the options I have. Something softened in his voice. Elena, I need you to understand something. The man I am, the things I do, they don't change just because I look at you and feel something I haven't felt since I was young enough to believe in redemption. I'm still going to do what I do. I'm still going to protect my interests and eliminate my threats. But you're on the protected list now. Non-negotiable. I didn't ask to be on your list. You existed. That was enough. The words hung between us, heavy with implication. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window, carefully staying to the side, out of sight from below, and watched the city breathe and move and live, oblivious to the war being waged in its shadows. I went through your things, I admitted quietly. The files in that room, the surveillance photos, the notes about my father, and there's a photo. You and my dad. You're both young. You're laughing. Dante was quiet for a long moment. Someone had just told a joke. Something about a priest and a politician. I don't remember the punchline, but Giovanni laughed so hard he cried. He had a good laugh. Made you want to laugh too. I never heard him laugh like that. The admission hurt coming out. He was always so quiet, so careful. Because he was protecting you from knowing what he'd been. From inheriting his guilt. Dante's voice roughened. He died believing he'd given you a clean slate. Let's not make him a liar, Elena. By letting you turn me into your kept woman? Your responsibility? By staying alive long enough for me to fix this. A pause, then. I have to go. Meeting with one of the families. Keep your phone on you. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call me. Dante. But he'd already hung up, leaving me alone in his penthouse prison, with nothing but surveillance photos and the ghost of my father's laughter. 3 days passed like a fever dream. I existed in strange suspension, sleeping in Dante's guest room in sheets that cost more than my monthly rent, eating food that appeared as if by magic in the kitchen, watching the city through windows I couldn't go near. Marco came by twice a day to check on me, his face revealing nothing, his presence both reassuring and suffocating. Dante didn't come. He called, though. Late at night, when the city lights blurred together like fallen stars and I couldn't sleep. He never said much, asked if I needed anything, told me in vague terms what he was doing, negotiations, meetings, eliminating obstacles. But I could hear the exhaustion in his voice, the weight of violence he carried like a crown. On the third night, he didn't call. I lay awake until 2 a.m., my phone clutched in my hand, anxiety building in my chest, like gathering storm clouds. What if something had happened to him? What if Constantine had made his move? What if I was alone in this glass tower with nowhere to go and no one to trust? At 2:37 a.m., I heard the private elevator open. I grabbed the kitchen knife I'd been keeping on my nightstand, a useless gesture, probably, but it made me feel less helpless and crept into the hallway. Dante stood in the foyer, his suit jacket gone, his white shirt torn and darkened with blood. His face was a map of fresh bruises, his knuckles split open and still bleeding. The knife clattered to the floor. Jesus Christ. I ran to him, my hands hovering over his chest, afraid to touch him and make whatever injuries he had worse. What happened? You need a hospital. I need a shower. His voice was flat, emptied out. And probably stitches. Marco's bringing a doctor. Dante. Not now, Elena. He moved past me, limping slightly, and headed toward the master bedroom he never used when I was here. Just not now. But I followed him anyway, because fear had transformed into something else, something fierce and protective that I didn't want to name. He'd made it to the bathroom, was fumbling with his shirt buttons, with hands that shook too badly to manage the task. I pushed his hands away without asking permission, and unbuttoned the shirt myself, trying to ignore the heat of his skin, the way his breath hitched when my fingers brushed his chest. The shirt came away sticky with blood. God, I whispered, seeing the full damage. A deep cut across his ribs, bruises blooming purple and black across his abdomen, more cuts on his shoulders and arms. Who did this? Constantine's men, 4 of them. Dante's hands gripped the marble counter, his arms shaking with the effort of staying upright. I killed 2. The others ran. He said it like he was reporting the weather, like taking lives was just another Tuesday night. I wet a washcloth with warm water and began cleaning the blood from his skin. My hands surprisingly steady, despite the horror churning in my stomach. This close, I could see every scar, every mark violence had left on him. There were dozens old bullet wounds, knife cuts, burns that looked like cigars had been pressed against his flesh. You're staring, he said quietly. I'm processing. I rinsed the cloth and continued cleaning. You've been hurt a lot. Occupational hazard. It's not an occupation. It's a death sentence. His hand came up fast, catching my wrist and stopping my movements. His eyes, when they met mine, were dark with something that might have been pain or fury or both. Do you think I don't know that? His voice was low, dangerous. Do you think I wake up every morning believing I'll see old age? I'm 34 years old, Elena. In my world, that's ancient. Most men in my position are dead by 30. Then get out. The words burst from me before I could stop them. Walk away. You said my father did it. Your father had something to trade. I have nothing but enemies and blood debts, and a reputation that won't let me disappear. He pulled me closer, until I was standing between his legs, until I could feel the heat radiating off his damaged body. This is what I am. This is all I'll ever be. I don't believe that. Then you're a fool. Maybe. I reached up and touched his face, gently tracing the bruise along his jaw. But you came here. You could have gone anywhere, one of your safe houses, to Marco, somewhere I'd never see you like this. But you came here. His eyes closed, and for just a moment, the mask cracked completely. I wanted. He stopped, his jaw working like the words were fighting him. I needed to see that you were safe, that all of this, the violence, the risk was worth something. I'm not worth dying for. That's not your call to make. The door chimed Marco with the doctor. Dante's eyes opened, and the vulnerability vanished as quickly as it had appeared. He straightened, becoming steel and shadow again, and released my wrist. Let them in, he said. Then go to bed. I'm not leaving you. Elena. My name was a command. Go to bed. But I didn't. I sat in the living room while the doctor stitched Dante back together, listening to the murmur of voices, the clink of medical instruments. Marco came out once, his face grim. He'll be okay, he said, though I hadn't asked. He's been worse. How is that supposed to be comforting? Marco almost smiled. It's not, but it's true. He moved toward the elevator, then paused. He cares about you. I've known Mr. Salvatore for 15 years, and I've never seen him like this. Reckless, distracted. He took risks tonight he never would have taken before, because of me, because you make him want to believe there's something beyond all this. And wanting things makes you vulnerable. Marco's expression was carefully neutral. Just thought you should know what you're costing him. He left, and his words settled over me like ash. An hour later, the doctor finally emerged, gave me care instructions in clipped medical terms, and left. The penthouse fell quiet again. That deep 3 a.m. silence when the whole city seems to be holding its breath. I found Dante in his bedroom, lying on top of the covers fully dressed, except for his ruined shirt, one arm thrown over his eyes. The bandages across his ribs were already spotted with blood. I told you to go to bed, he said without moving his arm. I don't take orders well. I've noticed. He lowered his arm and looked at me, and in the dim light from the hallway, he looked younger, almost vulnerable. You should be afraid of me. Elena. I know. You should run the first chance you get. I know that too. Then why are you still here? I crossed to the bed and lay down beside him carefully, avoiding his injuries. His body went rigid with surprise, but he didn't tell me to leave. After a moment, his arm came around me, pulling me against his uninjured side. Because someone has to make sure you don't bleed to death in your sleep, I whispered against his chest. And because I'm starting to think we're both beyond saving. His hand stroked through my hair, gentle despite the violence those fingers were capable of. Yeah, he breathed. We probably are. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then I felt the warm weight of Dante's arm across my waist, heard his breathing steady and deep beside me, and memory crashed back. I'd fallen asleep in his bed, curled against him like we were lovers instead of whatever we were. I turned carefully, trying not to wake him, and found him already watching me. His eyes were clearer than they'd been last night, but exhaustion still carved shadows beneath them. The bruises on his face had darkened to purple-black. "Your stitches need changing," I said, because it was easier than acknowledging how natural it felt to wake up beside him. Later, his voice was rough with sleep. "Marco made coffee. It's in the kitchen. You should rest." "I've rested enough." He sat up slowly, wincing, and swung his legs off the bed. The bandages across his ribs had bled through during the night, dark blooms spreading across white gauze. "We need to talk." Those 4 words never meant anything good. I followed him to the kitchen, where Marco had indeed left coffee and what looked like a full breakfast: spread eggs, toast, fruit, things that seemed absurd given the circumstances. Dante poured 2 cups and handed me one, then leaned against the counter, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Constantine made contact last night," he said finally, "before his men tried to kill me. He wants a meeting." "That's good, right? You can negotiate." "It's a trap." He said it matter-of-factly, like we were discussing the weather. "He'll try to take me out, grab you while I'm dead, and torture the information out of you at his leisure." The coffee turned to acid in my stomach. "So what do we do?" "We spring the trap." He sipped his coffee, watching my reaction. "But on our terms. I meet him publicly, somewhere he can't make a move without starting a war. Street, Catherine's church, neutral ground. The other families will have eyes there. He'll have to play nice. And then I offer him something he wants more than revenge." Dante's jaw tightened. "I offer him a share of the ports, legitimate business, clean money, enough to satisfy his greed without giving him enough power to be a real threat. Will that work? Maybe, if he's smart." A pause. "If he's not, I kill him in the church and deal with the consequences." I set my coffee down, my hands shaking. "You can't just—" "I can." He moved closer, his voice dropping. "I've killed men in churches before, Elena. In schools. In hospitals. I've put bullets in the heads of fathers at their daughters' weddings. Location doesn't sanctify violence or make it more forgivable. Dead is dead, no matter where the body falls." "Stop." I pressed my hands to my ears like a child. "Stop telling me these things." "Why?" He pulled my hands down, holding them captive. "Because you want to keep pretending I'm not a monster? Because you need the lie to justify why you're still here? Because I'm trying to see past the monster." The words exploded from me. "Because when I look at you, I see someone who came to me bleeding instead of going somewhere safe. Someone who paid for my mother's care without asking for anything in return. Someone who looks at me like I matter. You do matter." The words were barely audible. "That's the problem." He released my hands and turned away, bracing himself against the counter. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful control he was exerting over every movement. "The meeting is tomorrow night," he said. "I'm leaving you here with Marco and 6 other guards. You don't leave this penthouse. You don't answer the door. You don't." "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. If this is about me, if my father's secrets are the reason Constantine is doing this, then I should be there. Elena, I'm not helpless." I moved around to face him, forcing him to look at me. "I'm not some princess in a tower waiting for rescue. My father left me this mess. Let me help clean it up. You'd be bait." His hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. "I'd be using you to draw him out, keeping you visible enough to make him confident but protected enough that he can't touch you. It's dangerous. It's probably stupid. And if anything went wrong, it would be my choice." I covered his hand with mine. "Not yours, mine." He stared at me for a long moment, warring with himself. Then his other hand came up, framing my face, and he leaned in until our foreheads touched. "When this is over," he whispered, "I'm going to give you a chance to walk away. Clean break, new identity if you want it, money, protection, whatever you need to disappear and live a normal life. And if I don't want to disappear?" His hands tightened almost painfully against my skin. "Then we're both idiots. Because this doesn't end well. It can't. Men like me don't get happy endings, Elena. We get bullets or prison or betrayal. Those are the only options. Maybe there's a 4th option." I reached up and touched his lips with my fingertips, feeling them part slightly beneath my touch. Maybe we write our own ending. That's not how this works. I kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't strategic. I just needed to stop the words, to silence the resignation in his voice, to prove that we were more than the sum of our violence and our history. He went rigid with surprise, then made a sound low in his throat, half pain, half desperate relief, and kissed me back. It wasn't gentle. His mouth was hard against mine, demanding, tasting like coffee and copper from where he'd bitten his split lip. His hands tangled in my hair, holding me still while he took what he wanted, and I felt the careful control he'd been maintaining start to fracture. Then he hissed in pain, and I remembered his broken ribs, his stitches. Sorry, I tried to pull back, but he held me fast. Don't. His lips moved against mine. Don't stop. Don't think. Just. I kissed him again. Softer this time, more careful of his injuries. His hands gentled in my hair, and the kiss shifted into something different. Something that felt less like claiming and more like confession. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. This is a mistake, he said, but he didn't let me go. Probably. You should run. You keep saying that. Because it's true. His eyes searched mine, looking for something doubt, fear, sense. I'm going to hurt you, Elena. Not because I want to, because it's what I am. Then hurt me. I pressed closer, feeling his heart hammering against my palm. But hurt me while I'm choosing to stay, not while I'm running away. His laugh was broken, almost painful. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, or the most foolish. Can't I be both? He kissed me again, softer now, almost reverent. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with something that looked like grief. Tomorrow night, he said quietly, we end this, one way or another. The call came at 4 p.m., 16 hours before the meeting at Street Catherine's. I was in the kitchen making tea, a useless gesture toward normalcy, when Dante's phone rang. I watched his expression shift as he listened, watched the color drain from his face in a way that violence never achieved. When? His voice was ice. How many? A pause. I'm on my way. He hung up and stood frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear, his eyes unfocused. Dante? Fear crawled up my spine. What happened? They took Marco. He finally lowered the phone, and when he looked at me, I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes, genuine fear. Constantine's men grabbed him 3 hours ago from outside the building. They just sent proof of life. Is he alive, for now? Dante's jaw worked. They want me to come alone to a location in Queens. No weapons, no backup. Exchange myself for Marco, and they'll let him go. It's a trap. Of course it's a trap. He was already moving, grabbing his jacket, checking the gun holster beneath his arm. But Marco has been with me for 15 years. He's taken bullets for me. I'm not leaving him to die because I was too smart to walk into an obvious trap. I caught his arm. Then take backup. Take your whole army. You said yourself that you don't negotiate. If I bring anyone, they'll kill Marco before I even arrive. His eyes were haunted. Constantine knows that. He's betting I care more about loyalty than strategy. And he's right. So you're just going to throw your life away? If that's what it costs. He cupped my face with both hands, urgent, almost desperate. Listen to me. There's a safe in the master bedroom, behind the Rothko painting. Code is your father's birthday, 071268. Inside is cash, documents, passports. Take it and run. Marco's second in command is a man named Vincent. He'll get you out of the city. No. Elena. No. I grabbed his shirt, holding on like I could physically prevent him from leaving. You can't do this. You can't just we kissed this morning. You kissed me like it meant something, and now you're going to go die in some warehouse in Queens? That kiss did mean something. His thumb traced my lower lip, and his expression was devastatingly sad. It meant that I was right. I do care too much, and caring makes you weak. Caring makes you human. In my world, they're the same thing. He leaned in and kissed my forehead, gentle and final. If I survive this, I'll come back. If I don't say it. Please don't say it. If I don't, he continued relentlessly. You take that money and you disappear. You forget this ever happened. You forget me. You live a normal life somewhere far from here. And you, his voice cracked. You be happy, Elena. That's all I want. For you to be happy. Then he was gone. The elevator doors closing on his scarred, beautiful face, and I was alone in the penthouse with silence and terror, and a choice I knew I couldn't make. I didn't run. Instead, I opened the safe. The code worked on the first try. My father's birthday, unlocking Dante's secrets, and found exactly what he'd promised. Cash. Maybe $100,000. 3 passports with my face and different names. Documents that would let me disappear. And beneath it all, a leather journal with my father's name embossed on the cover. My hands shook as I opened it. The first entry was dated July 3rd, 2006, a month before he died. If you're reading this, Elena, then I'm gone, and you've gotten old enough to start asking questions. I'm sorry. For everything I did. For everything I hid from you. For the life I couldn't quite leave behind. No matter how hard I tried. I sank onto the bed, my vision blurring with tears, and kept reading. I was a bad man for a long time. I did things for Salvatore Sr. that I can never take back. Hurt people. Killed people. Told myself it was business, that violence was just part of the game. But then I met your mother, and she looked at me like I could be someone better. Like I could be clean. I made a deal to get out. Evidence for freedom. But the evidence, the real insurance policy, isn't what they think. There are no secret accounts, no files full of names and crimes. There's just this journal, a record of everything I did, everyone I hurt. My confession. I'm leaving it to you because you deserve to know the truth about your father. And because if Salvatore Sr. ever comes after you, or if that boy of his, Dante, ever threatens you, you can use this. Trade it for your freedom. Just like I did. Give them the truth. Let them destroy it. And walk away clean. Be better than me, sweetheart. Be the kind of person who doesn't need insurance policies and exit strategies. Be free. All my love, Dad. The journal fell from my hands. This was it. The secret Constantine was killing for. The evidence my father had supposedly hidden. And it was just a confession worthless to anyone except as proof that Giovanni Moretti had been exactly what everyone already knew he was. But Dante didn't know that. He was walking into a trap, ready to die, believing that the insurance policy was still out there somewhere. I grabbed my phone and dialed, praying he'd answer. It went to voicemail. Dante, it's me. I found it, my father's insurance. It's nothing. It's worthless. Just a journal, a confession. There's nothing Constantine can use. You don't have to do this. Please, just come back. Please. I hung up and stared at the journal, at my father's handwriting marching across pages yellowed with time and guilt. Then I did something either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. I called Vincent, found his number in the contacts Dante had left me, and told him where Dante was going. Get there first, I said, my voice steady despite the terror coursing through me. Stop him from walking into that trap. Miss Moretti, Mr. Salvatore gave specific orders. I don't care about his orders. Save him, please. Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Then, we're already mobilizing. Been tracking his phone since he left. We'll be there before he is. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If this goes wrong, if Dante dies because we intervened, then I'll take responsibility. I clutched the journal to my chest. Just save him. I hung up and stood in the center of Dante's bedroom, surrounded by evidence of his violence and his wealth and his desperate attempt to protect me, and prayed to a God I wasn't sure I believed in. Please, I thought. Please let him be okay. Because somewhere along the way, between shattered coffee cups and surveillance photos and stolen kisses, I'd fallen for the monster. And I wanted him to live long enough for me to tell him. The warehouse in Queens was burning. I watched from Vincent's car 3 blocks away, his phone on speaker as we listened to the chaos unfold. Gunfire crackled through the connection, sharp, percussive, deadly. Men shouting, glass breaking, someone screaming, then silence. Vincent's hand tightened on the steering wheel. Report, he said into the phone. His voice clipped. Static. More silence. Then, we got him. Marco's alive. Boss is... A pause that stopped my heart. Boss is hurt bad. We need a medic. Now. On the way, Vincent said, and the car lurched forward. He'd brought me along against his better judgment. I'd refused to stay behind, had threatened to call the police, had done everything short of physically fighting him. Now I sat in the passenger seat with my father's journal clutched in my lap and watched the warehouse grow larger, smoke pouring from its shattered windows. We screeched to a stop behind 3 black SUVs. Vincent tried to make me stay in the car, but I was already running, my shoes splashing through water from the fire hoses, my heart in my throat. Inside, the warehouse was chaos. Bodies on the floor, I counted 7, didn't let myself look at their faces. Shell casings everywhere, blood streaking the concrete like abstract art. And in the center of it all, Dante. He was on his knees, one arm wrapped around his ribs, the other hanging useless at his side. Blood soaked through his shirt, too much blood, and his face was gray with shock or pain or both. But he was alive. Elena. His voice was barely audible. You weren't supposed to. I dropped beside him, my hands hovering over his body, afraid to touch him and make things worse. Where are you hurt? Shoulder. Ribs again. Maybe a lung. He tried to smile and failed. Could be worse. How could it possibly be worse? Could be dead. He swayed, and I caught him, supporting his weight. Constantine? Dead, one of his men said from somewhere behind me. Took 3 to the chest. His whole crew's down. Dante's eyes closed. Good. Sirens wailed in the distance, fire trucks, ambulances, probably police. Vincent was barking orders, his men moving with practiced efficiency to stage the scene, make it look like something other than a Mafia execution. The medic arrived and tried to push me aside, but Dante's good hand caught my wrist, holding on with what little strength he had left. Stay, he said. Please. So I stayed while they cut away his shirt, while they packed the gunshot wound in his shoulder with gauze that immediately soaked through, while they argued about whether his lung was punctured or just bruised. I stayed while they loaded him onto a stretcher, while Vincent made calls to doctors who wouldn't ask questions, while the warehouse burned behind us. I stayed because he'd asked me to, because his hand in mine was the only thing keeping him conscious, because I loved him. The realization hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath. I loved this broken, violent man who just killed 7 people without hesitation. I loved the monster and the man and everything in between, and I had no idea what to do with that truth. They took us to a private clinic in Brooklyn, the kind of place that deals with gunshot wounds without involving the authorities. The doctor was efficient and quiet, removing the bullet from Dante's shoulder with the detached professionalism of someone who'd done this too many times to count. I sat in a chair beside the examination table, still holding his hand while they worked. He'd passed out somewhere during the car ride, and I was grateful. At least unconscious. He couldn't feel them digging metal out of his flesh. Marco appeared in the doorway, bandaged but walking. His face was a mess of bruises, and he moved like his ribs hurt, but he was alive. Thank you, I said quietly, for protecting him. That's my job. But his expression was gentle. You called Vincent. You saved his life. He was going to die for you. I know. Marco pulled up a chair and sat with a wince. That's who he is, loyal to a fault. It's his greatest strength and his most dangerous weakness. How long have you known him? 15 years. Since he was 19 and convinced he could run his father's empire better than the old man could. Marco's smile was sad. He was right, mostly, but the violence, the things he's had to do to hold power, they've eaten away at him. I've watched him become harder, colder, more efficient at killing. I thought he was gone completely. But then he met you. And suddenly he was reckless again. Emotional. Making mistakes because he was worried about keeping you safe. Marco leaned forward. I should resent you for that. Those mistakes could have gotten him killed. But instead, I'm grateful. Because for the first time in 10 years, I saw him care about something beyond power and survival. The doctor interrupted before I could respond, addressing Marco. He'll need rest, weeks of it. No stress, no physical activity. The shoulder will take months to fully heal. He won't listen, Marco and I said simultaneously. The doctor sighed like he'd expected as much. Then at least keep him somewhere safe. No more warehouse shootouts. After he left, Marco stood slowly. I'll give you two some privacy. But, Elena? He paused at the door. What happened tonight, Constantine's death, it changes everything. The other families will either fall in line or make their moves for power. The next few weeks will be the most dangerous Dante has faced in years. What are you saying? I'm saying he's vulnerable right now. Wounded. If you're going to leave, if you're going to use whatever your father left to buy your freedom, do it soon, before he recovers enough to stop you. He left, and I sat alone with Dante's unconscious form and my father's journal, and a choice I still didn't know how to make. Dante woke near dawn, his eyes unfocused with pain and medication. Elena? His voice was rough, confused. Are you real? I'm real. I squeezed his hand. You're okay. The bullet's out. You're going to be fine. Marco? Alive, thanks to you. He relaxed slightly, then tensed again, as memory caught up. Constantine, dead. It's over. Over, he repeated, like he didn't quite believe it. His eyes focused on me more clearly. You found it. Your father's insurance. I held up the journal. It's not what Constantine thought. Not what anyone thought. It's just my father's confession. A record of what he did. Who he was. There are no account numbers. No evidence that could hurt anyone still alive. It's worthless. Dante stared at the journal for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he laughed a harsh, pained sound that made him wince. Your father was smart. He didn't need real leverage. He just needed everyone to think he had leverage. The threat was enough. Until it wasn't. I set the journal on the table beside the bed. Until Constantine called his bluff. And you almost died for a lie. I almost died for you. His good hand reached up to touch my face. That's different. Is it, Elena? His thumb traced my cheekbone, and his eyes were clear now, intense. I killed 7 men tonight, shot 3 of them myself. I would have killed 70 if that's what it took to keep you safe. I need you to understand what that means. What I am. I understand. I covered his hand with mine. You're a man who loves his people so much he'll walk into traps for them. You're brutal and violent and you've done terrible things, but you're also the man who came to me bleeding instead of going somewhere safe. Who paid for my mother's care without asking for anything. Who looks at me like I'm worth saving. You are worth saving. So are you. I leaned down and kissed him gently, careful of his injuries. So are you. 3 weeks passed in careful suspension. Dante recovered slowly in a safe house in Connecticut, a sprawling estate surrounded by walls and guards, and the kind of security that made the Secret Service look casual. I stayed with him because he asked and because I couldn't bring myself to leave. Not yet. Not while I still didn't know what came next. The other families had indeed made their moves: territory grabs, power plays, attacks on vulnerable operations, but Vincent and the rest of Dante's men held the line, and slowly, grudgingly, order began to reassert itself. Constantine's death had left a vacuum, and Dante was filling it from a recovery bed with phone calls and strategic threats. He was good at this, maybe too good. I spent my days reading to him when he was too exhausted to work, changing his bandages, making sure he ate something beyond coffee and painkillers. We didn't talk about the future. We existed in a strange present tense where the violence was distant and the world beyond the estate walls didn't quite exist. But at night, when I lay beside him in the massive bed, careful not to jostle his healing shoulder, I felt the question hanging between us like a blade. What happens when he's better? On the 23rd day, he cornered me in the library. I was reading my father's journal again, trying to understand the man who'd written it. The entries were raw, honest, full of guilt that had eaten him alive. He'd died believing he'd saved me from his world. He'd been wrong. Your mother's asking to see you, Dante said from the doorway. I've arranged for secure transport if you want to visit. I looked up, surprised. You've been monitoring my calls? I've been protecting you. No apology in his tone. That requires knowing who you're in contact with. She's my mother, and she's in a facility I'm paying for, which makes her a potential pressure point. He moved into the room slowly, still favoring his shoulder. I'm not apologizing for keeping you safe, Elena. I didn't ask you to. No, you never ask for anything. He sat in the chair across from me, his eyes dark and unreadable. That's part of the problem. What problem? This. He gestured between us. Whatever this is, you're here because I asked you to stay. Because you feel obligated or guilty or something else you won't name. But you haven't chosen this, Elena. You've just defaulted into it. My chest tightened. That's not fair, isn't it? He leaned forward, intense. I've given you options: money, new identity, freedom to disappear. And instead, you're sitting in my library reading your dead father's confession, like it holds answers about us. Maybe it does. I clutched the journal. My father left this world, walked away, built a normal life, loved my mother, raised me. He proved it's possible. He died at 43 with a heart full of regrets. Dante's voice was hard. Is that what you want? A few years of pretending before the guilt kills you? Better than pretending the violence will stop. Better than waiting for the next Constantine, the next warehouse, the next bullet that doesn't miss. Silence fell between us, heavy and final. Dante stood slowly, his expression carved in stone. I'll have Vincent arrange the transport to see your mother. When you come back, I'll have the papers ready. New identity. Enough money to live comfortably anywhere you want. My lawyers have already drafted everything. Dante. No. He held up a hand. You're right. This doesn't work. I can't give you normal, and you can't live in my world without it destroying you. We both knew that from the start. Did we? I stood too, facing him across the distance of a few feet that felt like miles. Or did you decide that because being vulnerable scares you more than any threat from the other families? His jaw tightened. Being vulnerable gets you killed. Being alone kills you slower. I moved closer, searching his face. You're the loneliest person I've ever met, Dante. You have an army of men who'd die for you, but you don't have anyone who actually knows you, who sees past the violence to whatever's underneath. There's nothing underneath, just more violence. Liar. I pressed my hand to his chest, feeling his heart race beneath my palm. I've watched you these 3 weeks. You laugh at terrible jokes. You read poetry when you think I'm not looking. You've called my mother 4 times to check on her yourself, not through some intermediary. You're not just violence. Those things don't erase what I've done. I'm not asking you to erase it. My voice broke. I'm asking you to let me stay anyway. To choose us even though it's messy and dangerous and probably doomed. To stop pushing me away because you think it's noble or safe or whatever excuse you're using to keep from admitting you want me here. Of course I want you here. The words were raw, pulled from somewhere deep. I want you here so badly it terrifies me. I want to wake up beside you every morning. Want to come home to you after meetings where I've ordered deaths. Want to pretend that somehow your presence makes me less monstrous. So why? Because wanting isn't enough. His good hand came up to frame my face. Because I love you, Elena. Completely. Catastrophically. And loving you makes me weaker. Makes me vulnerable. Makes me the kind of man who walks into traps and takes risks he shouldn't take. Love is a liability I can't afford. The world seemed to stop. You love me, I whispered. I love you. His thumb brushed my lower lip. Which is exactly why I'm letting you go. What if I don't want to go? Then you're an idiot. I've been called worse. I reached up and pulled his face down to mine. By you, actually, Elena. I kissed him before he could finish the protest. Kissed him hard and desperate and claiming, pouring 3 weeks of tension and fear and unspoken feelings into the connection of our mouths. His body went rigid, then surrendered, his good arm wrapping around my waist and pulling me against him. The kiss turned desperate. His mouth opened under mine, and I tasted coffee and painkillers and something darker, the violence he carried, the blood on his hands. All the reasons this was impossible, but I also tasted him, the man beneath the monster, and I wanted more. I love you too, I said against his lips. I love you and I'm staying. Not because I'm obligated, not because I'm afraid. Because I choose this. I choose you. You'll regret it. But his arms tightened around me. You'll see something you can't unsee, and you'll realize. I've already seen you kill 7 men, remember? I watched you covered in blood. I know exactly what you are. I pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. And I'm staying anyway. He stared at me for a long moment, searching for doubt, for uncertainty, finding only determination. You're insane, he finally said. Probably. This won't be easy. I don't want easy. I can't promise you safety. Can't promise I won't get killed tomorrow or next week or... Then stop promising and just kiss me. So he did. And in that kiss was surrender, his and mine both. A giving up of control, of carefully maintained distance, of all the logical reasons we should walk away. We were staying, both of us, together. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of the Connecticut estate, watching dawn break over the grounds through windows that still felt impossibly large. The coffee maker hissed and sputtered, filling the room with familiar scent. Behind me, I heard Dante's footsteps, quiet, but not quite silent. He'd been moving better lately, the shoulder finally healing properly, though he'd always carry the scars. We both would. Morning, he said, his voice still rough with sleep. His arms came around my waist from behind, and I leaned back against his chest, letting his warmth seep into me. Morning. I turned in his arms and looked up at him. The bruises had faded months ago, but he looked different now, less haunted, almost peaceful, in the rare moments when work wasn't consuming him. I have a meeting in the city at noon, he said, pressing a kiss to my forehead. The Luciano family wants to discuss territory arrangements. Should be straightforward. Should be. The words that meant violence was possible but not guaranteed. "I'll come with you," I said, because that's what I did now. I sat in on meetings, learned the language of power and threat, became part of his world instead of hiding from it. "You don't have to." "I want to." I'd had this argument with him 100 times. Besides, Maria Luciano likes me. She's less likely to pull a gun if I'm there. His laugh was soft. "True. You've become quite the diplomat. I learned from the best." I poured coffee for both of us, adding sugar to his the way he pretended he didn't like but actually preferred. "Mom called last night. Her numbers are good. The doctors think she might have another year. Maybe 2. Something complicated crossed his face. Grief. Maybe. Or recognition of borrowed time. That's good. It's because of you. The treatment. The care. Don't." He caught my chin gently. "We've had this conversation too. I did what anyone would do. You did what someone with too much money and questionable morals would do. It's not the same as anyone. Point taken." He kissed me, slow and thorough, tasting like coffee and home. When he pulled back, his eyes were serious. "Vincent called this morning. Early. The Constantine investigation is officially closed. Ruled a gang dispute. No charges." I set my cup down carefully. "That's good news. It means we're clear. Officially. No more looking over our shoulders for that particular threat. But there would always be other threats. Other families. Other men looking to take what Dante had built. We both knew it. We'd stopped pretending otherwise. "I have something for you," he said suddenly. "Been waiting for the right time. But I'm starting to think there's no right time. There's just time we have." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and my breath caught. "Dante, let me finish before you panic." He opened the box, revealing a ring simple gold band with a small diamond, elegant but not ostentatious. "I know we can't have a white wedding or a honeymoon in Paris or whatever fantasy you might have had as a little girl, but I can offer you this, a promise, that as long as I'm breathing, you're mine and I'm yours, that I'll protect you with everything I have, that when I die probably sooner than either of us wants you'll be taken care of." "That's the most unromantic proposal I've ever heard," I said, my vision blurring with tears. "I'm not a romantic man." "Liar." I took the box from his hands. "You read Neruda. You bring me coffee in bed. You had Vincent track down my favorite book from childhood and spent $3,000 on a first edition. Those are practical gestures. They're love." I pulled the ring from the box and held it up to the morning light. "And so is this. You're asking me to marry you, Dante Salvatore, to legally tie myself to a man whose enemies would love nothing more than to hurt him through me, to become a target, to live with danger for the rest of our lives, however long that is." "Yes." He didn't look away, didn't soften the truth. "That's exactly what I'm asking." I slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. "Then I accept." I reached up and pulled his face down to mine. "On one condition." "Name it." "When you die, which will be from old age in 40 years, not from a bullet, I get to scatter your ashes somewhere beautiful. Somewhere that would horrify the other families. A garden, maybe, or a library." His laugh was surprised, genuine. "You're planning my funeral already?" "Someone has to." I kissed him. "You're too busy planning everyone else's." The Luciano meeting went smoothly. Maria was indeed less hostile with me present, and we negotiated a territory exchange that satisfied both families. I sat beside Dante at the conference table in a restaurant that closed its doors to the public for our 2-hour discussion, and I learned again how power moved in this world quietly, through carefully worded threats and strategic concessions. Afterward, Dante took me to a small Italian place in the village, the kind of hidden gem that only locals knew about. We ate pasta and drank wine and talked about nothing important, the weather, a book I was reading, plans to renovate one of the estate's guest houses, normal things, except we weren't normal, and we never would be. "I need to tell you something," Dante said as we walked back to where Vincent waited with the car. "I've been thinking about what comes next. After me. Don't. Elena." He stopped walking, pulled me into a quiet doorway away from the street. "I'm 35. In my world, that's borrowed time. I need to think about succession, about what happens to the family to you when I'm gone. You're not going anywhere, probably not tomorrow." His smile was sad, "But eventually, and when I do, I want you taken care of, protected. I've been talking to the lawyers, setting up trusts, safeguards, alliances that will hold even without me. You can't control everything from beyond the grave. Watch me." He touched my face gently. You're my greatest weakness, Elena. Everyone knows it. When I die, you become leverage, a target, a symbol. I need to know you'll be safe. I'll be devastated. The admission came out, whispered. I'll be destroyed and lost, and I don't know if I'll survive it. You will, certainty in his voice. Because you're stronger than you think. Because you survived your father's death and your mother's illness and me. Because you're Elena Moretti Salvatore, and that means something now. Does it? Does being your wife make me powerful or just paint a bigger target on my back? Both. He pulled me close, his arms tight around me. Always both. That's the price of loving me. But it also means you have the resources of my entire empire behind you. Every man I command. Every alliance I've built. They're yours. I buried my face against his chest and breathed him in cedar and gunpowder and that smoke that never quite faded. I don't want your empire. I just want you. You have me. His lips pressed against my hair, for as long as fate allows. That night, back at the estate, we made love slowly, carefully, mapping each other's bodies like we were memorizing geography. His scars under my fingers, my skin beneath his lips, the breathless space between heartbeats where the world narrowed to just us. Afterward, I lay with my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat steady and strong. Tell me something true. I whispered into the darkness. Something you've never told anyone else. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, sometimes I dream I'm someone else. Someone clean. I own a bookstore maybe, or I teach literature at some small college. And you walk in one day, and I get to meet you as that person. The person I might have been if my father hadn't been who he was. If I'd had choices. My throat tightened. Would that person have loved me too? That person would have fallen to his knees the moment you smiled. His hand stroked through my hair. But he wouldn't have been strong enough to protect you. Wouldn't have had the resources to save your mother. Wouldn't have been able to give you anything except a normal, limited life. Maybe that would have been enough. Maybe. He kissed the top of my head. But we'll never know. We only get this life. This version. The violent, complicated, impossible one. I choose it, I said again. The same words I'd said 6 months ago. I choose you. Every day, Dante. Even knowing what you are, what we are. I choose us. His arms tightened around me. Then we're both fools. Probably. Definitely. I smiled against his skin. Perfect. Outside, the estate was quiet. Guards patrolled the perimeter. Security cameras watched in their silent vigil. Somewhere in the city, the other families schemed and planned and waited for weakness. But here, in this moment, we were safe. We were together. And we were loved. It wasn't forever. Nothing ever was. But it was enough.